Welcome to Gate City Chronicles. I'm your host, Kevin Avard, and I'm proud to introduce our first guests with Mr. John McPhee?
Jonathan McPhee.
Jonathan
right.
McPhee, and you are the conductor for the New Hampshire Symphony?
Nope, Symphony, New Hampshire.
See,
We just changed the name, so it's okay.
I think the people that watch the show are getting used to this. I get it backwards sometimes. And of course, Alderman Dan Moriarty.
Yes.
Right, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
I'm honored, and like I said, embarrassingly, but in the beginning, I haven't been to the Symphony since 1981 or 82. And I was enthralled, I was mesmerized, sitting with my dad, and we were watching the Symphony, and I was just amazed at how the people were doing everything by memory, it seemed, playing all those notes, remembering all those lines, perfect, and that part, plus the sound, was incredible. I could never aspire to be that good when it came to an instrument, but that's one of the things that I can remember drawing back from 1981, 82. So I'm welcome to the show.
It's interesting you say that, though, because what got me into conducting to start with was I think I was in 3rd grade and was living in Connecticut at the time. And some orchestra came through. It was probably a college orchestra, and it was a holiday concert, and I was sitting there, and I looked at the conductor in front of the orchestra, and I thought, boy, isn't that cool? He's thinking the music, and they're all playing what he's thinking. So that energy, that communication of what's going on is the thing that I picked up on and said, what a cool job. I would love to have that.
Now, you're up there doing your conducting. And, you know, it's either this, I don't even know if
That's not bad, actually.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. You know what, you've got a feel for, you have an engine in front of you and you're torquing it, it seems. How much control do you really have of what's going on at that during a concert?
Control is probably not the right word. I mean, yes, the conductor's job is to organize musically what's happening. My score, of course, is every single line that everybody's playing in the entire orchestra. It's pretty well memorized by the time you get to the performance anyway. Eye contact is everything. Listening, it's a collection of people who are working together and feeding off of each other. And
are you their ears, so to speak? Hey, John, you're up a little bit.
Well, yeah, I'm their ears, but I'm also how they are relating to each other. So, you know, sometimes somebody is a little too loud over here, and you go, you know, themes over there, and
yeah.
You don't have to say anything, you just point, you know, it's like
hey,
a little bit less there.
Right.
And, you know, this is, as you had done properly, the right hand is basically beating time. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that sets your tempo up. This has come in, nope, not yet, a little bit later, a little louder, a little softer. So there's all of this, you know, people often wonder what kind of choreography a conductor is doing, but there's actually a lot of things that you're saying with your hands, even more with your eyes, and the level of communication that happens from player to player to player is very sophisticated. And the conductor connects with each one of these individual people and then puts them together as groups too.
That's a dynamic that people probably miss when they go to one of these. I played in a little rock band, and we've had 6 of us. And eye contact was really critical. It's usually, you're too loud!
But you said you also had a jazz background, right?
Yes.
And if you look at a jazz combo, they'll go through a variation after a theme, and they'll do 16 bars, and then you'll see one go, that's your turn to take over and do the 16 bars. And that communication, I love to watch that in the jazz combo because it really is, it's so friendly and it's so real. It's like, oh, that's really cool. Okay, we'll wait until I get my 16 bars.
Right. And it's, I don't know, critical. Yeah, nobody's critical of each other. Just go ahead and have at it. Dan, you're a groupie.
I am a groupie. I've attended each show for at least 2 years now, and I look forward to it. Every time I make a point when I see the upcoming show list, go down and check out the CD from the library and play it over and over in my car. And one thing that I've noticed for me, sometimes it takes a while until the tune grows on me. And the perfect example is Tchaikovsky's Fourth, which I wish I'd listened to it more before the concert, because then I would have appreciated it much more. So in sort of following on the previous discussion that you had, Jonathan, I mean, the score is just notes, but it doesn't impart feeling. So a couple questions I'm curious about. When you hear a tune for the first time, do you immediately, are you able to appreciate it the first time through, or do you have to listen to it? But not only that, when you see the score, how do you get an idea of how you want it to be played? And sort of by analogy, there are cover bands that, rock bands that play, by definition, you're a cover band. Do you ever listen to other versions of it to sort of compare, to find out what nuances you want in that?
Boy, this is a great question, and it's a question I don't think I've heard anybody ask.
Very good question.
First of all, when I pick up a musical score and it's got all the little notes on the page, that's a language to me, so that I can read it like you read a book. You read a book and you hear the words in your head, and I can look at a score and hear the piece of music in my head too, the harmonies and who's got what theme. So I'm already formulating my own opinion about how fast it should go, what the prominent themes are. These notes should be shorter, these should be longer, because as you say, there's no feeling, and you can play a set of notes in a variety of different ways. You can play it very short, you can play it very long. But there's an even more subtle thing, which you just touched on, which is, yes, I could pick up a recording, and I guarantee if you pick up 4 recordings of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, they're going to be wildly different. Mm-hmm. They're not the same.
I don't know if I'll be able to notice them.
You will. I swear. First of all, look at the timings of them, and you'll see that this one is 29 minutes long. This one's 33.
Or in a different key, possibly?
No, they would stick with the same key, because that's all pretty set. But the how you could play the same number of notes and everything else and have 4 minutes difference tells you the pacing is different. But one of the things I always marvel at is it's never the same interpretation from orchestra to orchestra either. In other words, when I go to Germany and I conduct an orchestra there and I'm doing Beethoven, it's going to sound different than the Beethoven I do with an American orchestra, because their tradition, their history, their style of playing, what they bring to it. I mean, you go to Vienna and they were playing it in Beethoven's time. Mm-hmm. So there's a residual memory of style that's there. And one of the worst mistakes would be to go into an orchestra someplace else and say, no, it has to be exactly this. Ooh, and you miss a lot. Yeah. I mean, people do it, but I think it's a mistake. And that's one of the things that's even with your own orchestra, you may do 3 performances of the same piece. There are no 3 performances that are the same. It's different. The audience brings something different to it.
Is there usually a change in the tone as time goes on with the personality of the orchestra, with new people coming in and going? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's got to be. What is that process?
Ooh, again, this is complex, because you're talking about, unlike going to the music store and picking up a new violin. I mean, you can tell you can get a better violin than the $50 violin. You can get the $380,000 violin. It's going to play differently. My instrument, well, you're up in the several million. But my orchestra, my instrument is made up of 75 people with their own instruments, with their own personalities. I've been with Symphony New Hampshire now 4 years, this is I think the 5th coming up. The personality of the orchestra has changed. Part of that has to do with an optimism and an enthusiasm. Having the hall that we perform in, Keefe, on Elm Street, was pretty dingy, dark, and dull sounding. Right. And this summer, it was renovated. It's nice, bright, inviting. The sound is much clearer, much better, and that immediately makes the musicians go, oh, this feels good. And it feels good. It's not just how it sounds, but it actually feels good.
And to judge that, if anybody wants to know what he's talking about, go into a room where it's all carpeted and sing. And if it's flat, then go into another room that it sounds like it's a hall and sing. And which would you rather do? And that's...
Sing in the bathroom where it sounds...
Ta-da, yeah, you've got the raindrops going on. Forget it.
And in my case, I like the lack of the cloth on the walls because, which leads me sort of into a question. My hearing isn't as good as it used to be, and I actually worry about it because my father in his later days was near deaf, and that concerns me quite a bit. So I find myself always wanting to turn up the volume, which I can't in a live show. But in my minivan, I can crank it as loud as I want. Yeah. So I come in, and immediately the main difference between what I hear on the CD versus the live shows, it's much quieter. But surely as you age, your hearing must get checked. I don't know if you ever had yours checked.
Every year.
Every year.
I get mine every year.
And does that affect the musicians and how they might lose the highs and suddenly start playing differently?
Yeah, I mean, it's true that over time our hearing does change. And in fact, there is a man, Ronald Wolford, he's Australian and went around the world studying musicians and hearing and came up with some really surprising results. One is that as musicians age, certain musicians, because of their instrument, will lose different parts of their hearing because it's under stress, like a percussionist will, that high end will take some of the high ends out of their hearing because it just gets killed. Violinists, because their left ear is on their violin the whole time, will tend to lose a little bit of that too. The right's okay. But what he noticed was the human being is an amazing creature. They have learned over time and experience to compensate. So what you may be losing slightly as a violinist in a string quartet, you use your eyes more to make sure that things are staying where they should. And then you can also, for example, a piano tuner will not listen to the note. They get ear strain. What they listen to are the beats between the notes. So that when you hear something that's out of tune, and you know, the same. There are so many complexities that go into how we hear that you know, musicians are very careful about their hearing. There are all kinds of studies. There are special attenuators that you can get, earplugs that are focused at certain frequencies to protect your hearing. Yep. If you haven't had a hearing test, you might go.
Yep, I have.
Yeah. Okay. And you know, they're pretty
That's
good
what worried
at
me.
telling you. Ah.
So the culture of classical music, is it growing, depleting? What's happening to this the whole genre of music?
Kevin, that's an interesting question, because if you go back about 15 years to the League of American Orchestras, which is the organization that most orchestras belong to, their banner headline was "Classical music is dead and dying."
That's not too positive.
No, it's not too positive. And then Henry Fogel came in as the head of the League of American Orchestras. He ran the Chicago Symphony for 20 years. And made a point of traveling around America looking and listening to regional orchestras around. And what we've discovered by collecting all the musical data is actually there are more classical musical performances across America than at any time in history. The difference is where there used to be the big five, you know, New York Philharmonic, Boston Symphony, Chicago, San Francisco. Now there's a huge number of regional orchestras, of which Symphony New Hampshire is one, that is serving a wider community, and the role is changing. So it's actually, it's a fact that there are more classical musical performances. So if from that standpoint, you'd have to say it's growing because more people have access to it, instead of just being in the big metropolitan areas. Music education is all over the map, depending on where you live. But the symphony's role is really should be expanding beyond, we do concerts, to we we reflect a certain part of what is good about our community, because music brings people together. So one of the first things that I was asking when I came here was, where are the people, what do they do? Let's see how much we can align our musical activities with where people are. So some of the holiday concerts, finding out what their tastes are. We've got a partnership with Manchester Community Music School where we do a crazy Halloween concert every year with the kids side by side in costume, which is a good way of making crusty musicians laugh at themselves. It's like, nobody can play this unless you dress up.
Make it light, that's good.
Make it light, make it real.
Well, you said a key word, community, and one of the things that we were talking before we got on camera was the fact that music and arts really do add to the whole quality of life in a community. We were talking about, you were mentioning about the subway, how that, you know, if you play classical music in one part of the subway, that the crime went down.
It did.
And vice versa. It was like a blind study test. By adding a higher quality, and I would call it a higher art, if you will, because of the discipline that you have to get to when you're hours and hours and hours and hours of practicing the same thing over and over and over again to get to a point of perfection. When you bring this type of quality into a community, it lifts the spirit. It drives the quality of life up.
That's definitely true. That's definitely true. And we have, you know, there are various programs and studies. I know in Venezuela there has been a whole phenomenon, the El Sistema program, where classical music is being taught to young people who really come from destitute families, have no education. It teaches them discipline. They learn an instrument. It brings them together. It's a positive social way of behaving.
Yep.
They're doing something together. It instills confidence in being able to achieve something. And the young people who, in fact, Gustavo Dudamel, who's the conductor for Los Angeles Philharmonic, he's one of Dudamel. He's one of the big success stories, and kids from Venezuela who have managed to really achieve a high level on their classical instruments are now in orchestras all over the world. And to hear their stories, now it's an extreme case, but their stories, they had nothing. This was their ticket out. It was their hope. It taught them life lessons that said you don't have to be a street kid your whole life. Now, in a less extreme measure, you know, statistics are out there like if you want to raise your school's scores, have mandatory music programs. There's ample data on that. 30% increase in scores across all socioeconomic levels. English, geography, math, surprising.
In our household, we have musicians. I'm not a great musician. I told you I play saxophone, but I'm really a singer. We have a saxophone.
I heard a little bit of that
Yeah,
earlier.
well.
That was good.
Big band stuff is more, I like big band blues. But we started Kylie and Kevin, Kylie on the flute, Kevin on the saxophone. And the whole idea was, even as they were struggling in the beginning, the hard part, you know, I can't blow in it. I can't do it. You can, just try it. Just keep trying. Then they get that little victory. I can do it. I can do a C. Now they're playing Star Wars. Oh my gosh. But the whole development and the accomplishment of what was dread, there is success through the hard work. And they're using both sides of their brains.
Yeah.
They're learning a new language, and they're developing new friends. They have another outside activity instead of Xbox.
You know, I'll tell you a funny one. Sometimes it takes someone outside of us to be able to have the light bulb go on something obvious. I was conducting in Japan, I guess it was about 15 years ago. And, you know, everybody here was reading the Japanese translations of the books on managing a company. You know, Honda was going like crazy, and Toyota, and quality control and all this stuff. And so I was on the return flight from being there with the Tokyo Philharmonic, and I was sitting next to a Japanese businessman, and I was reading the book. And he leaned over and he said, "What do you do?" And I said, I'm actually a musician. And he said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." "What kind of musician?" I said, "Conductor." And he said, "Why are you reading that?" And I said, "Well, because, you know, it's about successful management styles, and I'm always kind of curious about that." And we got to talking farther, and he said, "Do you know why we send our children from Japan to American schools to study music?" And I said, "No." He said, "Because in our society, we tend not to want the individual to rise. We have a very group approach to things, and it's very centered on sort of factual education. But we recognize that the only thing that really teaches abstract thinking is music. And what makes America great in business is their ability to think abstractly and think outside the box. So we send our children there to study music and know that they're going to come back home and not be musicians, but be businessmen, designers." And I was sitting there going, I wish we could get him on some of the councils about education in our schools, because that's exactly what we're removing, is music education.
And speaking of councils,
As the representative politician in the room, or all the city politician, I'm obliged to at least report to the audience that there is a National Arts Council. There is a line item in the budget, in the city budget, for funding such items. Just a couple days ago, there was the annual meeting, the first time they did it this way, where everybody got together. The applicants for these funds came in and presented their organization. And a lot of them were, I would say most of them, were based on providing music and arts, whether it's ballet or music lessons, or a concert for the kids, in the case of the Symphony New Hampshire. And their application was to help generally the needy, or kids who wouldn't otherwise be able to get into it, have an opportunity to do that. So certainly Symphony New Hampshire is getting involved with the community that way. And the city is going to try in some sense to fund that.
I have noticed there is a huge, I mean, first of all, Symphony, we rebranded from Nashua Symphony over, I think, 86, we're 89 years old now. But we are the last major large orchestra, professional large orchestra left in the state. And one of the things that we are charged with really is trying to branch out across the state so that we can be a resource to education and schools. And Nashua being our home, I've been very, very aware of this recognition that there is a lot to be had by having the symphony involved in life and music education and what it can do. So I'm feeling very positive.
Part of the problem with getting kids into playing these various instruments, I learned accidentally, because I've decided to become a world-class concert musician, except for the fact that I had no talent or the time. But hey, it's at least fun to explore and ask myself, if I were to play an instrument, what would it be? And work with my kids, if they were to play an instrument, what would it be? And rather than force them to answer the question, pick one instrument, how about if you pick a wind? How about if you pick a brass? How about if you pick a string? And I discovered, certainly in the case of the wind, the clarinet, everybody's a clarinetist, everybody's a flutist, you can buy them pretty cheap. But if you want to play bassoon,
oh, no, that's a really hard one.
That's a different story.
It is a different story. They're very expensive to get good ones.
It was like $2,000 or $3,000 for like entry-level bassoon.
What is the average age for that? I know that it was tough for Kylie on the flute. She's in 4th grade. That's basically when they got started.
3rd and 4th.
And she she took to it, but they don't get really into the harder instruments until what, 7th, 8th?
Yeah. The 3rd and 4th grade generally, strings, you're thinking about strings in 3rd grade and 4th grade are winds and brass. And usually they won't start you on something like bassoon or even oboe, because there are a lot of things that are involved with it. You have to learn to make your own reeds. That's a whole thing. You know, and you were playing saxophone. That's one reed, and you buy a box full of them, and you go through until you find a couple that work.
Right.
Oboe, you can buy store-bought reeds. Same thing with bassoon. You have to learn the art of making them, which takes a lot of time just to do that. So, generally, for example, in my own musical education background, I started on piano, and that was my bass instrument always. But when I wanted to do a group instrument, and I was in, I guess 5th grade, I started on flute. It was terrible. Flute was just totally the wrong instrument for me. I practiced so hard, and you know, physically, the shape of my mouth was totally wrong. I got lots of not much note.
Right.
And I had a band teacher who said,
This isn't for you.
no, this isn't working for you here. But I think if you tried an oboe, it would be your instrument, and because you've got, you know, good intonation and everything on flute. So I picked up the oboe and just went like that. It was absolutely the right instrument. And
Is the fingering complicated compared to the, well, the saxophone's got to be the easiest.
well, saxophone is similar to the flute.
Right.
Same basic patterns, but and oboe. Clarinet's totally different.
Oh, okay.
Clarinet was one of the last instruments to get standardized, so it's you know, all over the shop. Bassoon, they're still making up fingerings for bassoon.
Right. That reminds me, you had a show a couple ago where was it Greg Newton did a solo,
You did.
which watching him on stage, standing up, playing, it was essentially he was playing saxophone in a symphony, because it had the same range.
It's a similar,
it had the similar sound. It's a wind instrument, and the way he holds it, it was like he was.
Was he wearing sunglasses?
He was wearing sunglasses and playing Santa Claus. I mean,
But there is a piece.
really?
No.
No, but there is
How
a
often
piece
does
for
a
bassoon.
bassoonist get to play a front show, like a lead like that?
You know, bassoon.
was
concerto-
awesome.
Yeah.
It was my favorite
People
part of the whole
loved
show.
it. I know, people love it. And when we took it out to the schools, which we did, the kids just you know, it's a great big red.
I want one of those.
You're going like this. There's a piece called Dead Elvis, written for solo bassoon and orchestra, where the bassoonist has to dress up like Elvis and play it. It's a classical piece, but it's kind of crazy.
So what's coming up next? You have a concert coming up soon.
We do. And one of the unique things about Symphony New Hampshire is that we have our own chorus too. Holly Krofka is the music director for the Symphony Chorus. And this is our final
Congratulations
concert.
to her for getting selected to be the conductor for that this past season.
She's terrific. I was so happy when she won the audition for the position. And she's transforming the sound of the chorus. The chorus is growing. And this final concert for the season, before we get to the summer, is we're doing selections from some Verdi opera choruses. And we're also doing selections from Puccini's opera La Bohème. And then we're doing selections from Phantom of the Opera and Les Miserables.
Which Les Mis? I was sent to ask that.
Which
Which section? If I could find out which piece within those.
Oh, several.
Because I don't know if it's in the program, which I have. If it's not
No,
detailed.
we didn't
You didn't detail it.
Is there a website that people can
Yes.
visit to see what the calendar is?
It's www.symphonynh, all one word, .org. And it'll have the whole program and everything that you want to know about it.
So are we in concrete about Holman Stadium this year, or is it the
We are committed to doing Holman Stadium. Yep. We're putting together the program now, and of course it's a huge undertaking to be able to put sound out on a baseball field.
right,
But,
without having the echo distract you?
Are you going to be?
Well-
Is the symphony going to be mic'd?
Oh, it has to be mic'd.
Has to be mic'd?
Yeah, anytime you
Yeah.
play outdoors.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think a carpeted room is
Right.
tough to play
Okay.
in, you play outdoors and it's like,
Yeah.
Where are we?
yeah, I can't hear anything. So there are a lot of challenges to that, and you know, we're still not up to the total budget level that we want to be at, but we're still working on it.
Are you looking for sponsors, or is it completely funded by the city, or the state?
We're always looking for sponsors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And who do they contact if they want to sponsor you?
They can go to the website, and I think there's a contribute button on the website, but call the Symphony office and talk to Eric Valliere, who's the executive director, and he can certainly point you in the right direction and tell you how to become a contributor.
Is it in the budget for, you said there was a line item?
Yes, there's 35,000 this year plus 15,000 left over from the previous year for a total of 50 to be split among, I think there are like 8 applicants. So it's not huge dollars, but it's enough to fund an event, a decent sized event. And it's a good chance. I mean, Symphony in New Hampshire will get some amount, and hopefully they'll get a fair amount.
Wonderful.
And we choose that program based on how much we have to work with, because some pieces, if they're smaller, obviously they don't cost as much as when you really bring out the big guns. And
right.
Speaking of big guns, I would love to do Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture to finish that one.
Yes.
Not sure if we have guns yet, though.
Yeah.
So
PA systems
when is
have a
that?
couple.
When is that scheduled? Is it June?
It's in August.
August.
I believe it's the 19th of August. Pretty sure it's the 19th of August.
All right, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And is there any last thoughts that you want to leave with our viewers at all, or did we cover everything?
I have a million questions that I didn't get to, but
Oh,
another
I'm
day.
sorry.
That's
We'll
okay.
have to do this offline.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have you back on if that's
How's
okay.
your home stereo?
My home stereo is okay. You'll be shocked that a lot of musicians actually don't have great stereo systems because we have the best stereo system in the world, which is the orchestra. So
But you
anything
can't play
is
it every
kind of-
day.
No, that's true. That's true. It's just no. It's a good one.
My little two-piece band, we use the Bose system, the little Bose towers. Yeah, it's nice.
I interviewed a long time, now I'm digressing, a long time ago, there's a company called Martin Logan in Lawrence, Kansas, where I'm from. And theirs are like $20,000 for these speakers. I just wonder if, I'd like to have somebody who actually can hear the difference actually tell us.
Oh, I'm sure there's a difference.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, you really can.
highs
The
and
old
lows,
Klipsch
mids.
La Scalas were phenomenal because they're huge. You put them in a corner of the room, so they turn the whole room into a speaker cabinet,
There you go.
and they move air. And that's what you really need, is you need it to move air, and because that's what real music does. It moves air.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to say goodbye for now, and we'll ask you to come back on and stay tuned for Nashua Spotlight. We're going to actually do some behind the scenes, hopefully with the orchestra,
That would be great.
and we'll give you some more coverage, and hopefully that our viewers will be able to get a little inside look at what goes on in not in the pit, but above the pit.
Above the pit,
Above
on
the
stage.
pit. So until next week, thanks for watching Gate City Chronicles. We'll see you.